Almost. Whew. Hi, I can explain. My name is Matthijs van Oosterhout. I specialize in modular camera design, and I'd love to show you how you can install a custom open source firmware on your camera. Let's unpack. Let's start with the firmware part. Firmware is a bit like software, and it is a program and contains the instructions for the microprocessor to deal with the rest of the circuit, such as how to get the data from the sensor to the SD card, what kind of processing is done to the photo, but also which features exist on the camera. Open source means that the code that runs on your camera is accessible to anyone. Normally, this is not the case. Most manufacturers of cameras release firmwares that are closed source. It does not allow the consumer to look in how it works or even modify it. Luckily for us, hobbyist photographers, programmers and hackers have taken it upon themselves to reverse engineer the closed source firmware of the manufacturer. Let's take a short detour. I'd like to show you this camera. This is the Asahi Pentax Spotmatic SP500. It was released in the early 70s as a budget alternative to the Pentax SP2. The SP500 has a maximum shutter speed of 1/500th of a second, compared to the professional model which had 1/1000th of a second, and the self-timer has been removed. 3 years later, this camera came out. This is the Asahi Pentax Spotmatic SP1000. This was an upgraded model to the SP500. It was a little bit more expensive, yes, but in return you would get the 1/1000th shutter speed available only on the professional model. So now you perhaps have a reason to upgrade your camera. Okay, so what? Well, there's a catch. It would be cost prohibitive to release two different cameras with two different mechanisms. So what did they do? There are no differences between these two cameras. They simply didn't print the 1/1000th of a shutter speed on the shutter speed dial. It is there and completely functional. Now imagine the same kind of logic of creating multiple models with different sets of features for consumers to choose between to firmware. A future in which hardware and software which we own can be freely modified by us, even be repaired, is a future worth fighting for. And it's not just about consumer rights either, while we are living in a time in which it has become very clear that the continuous mass production of cameras is an unsustainable business model that is destroying our ecosystem. An open source firmware helps us in prolonging the lifespan of our digital cameras. That depends on which camera you have. Most Canon cameras, for example, are either covered by the CHDK, the Canon Hack Development Kit for smaller point-and-shoot cameras, whereas Magic Lantern is the custom firmware for more advanced Canon cameras such as DSLRs. But custom firmwares also exist for Nikon DSLRs, such as the Nikon Hackers, or for example P-Tool for the Panasonic cameras. Usually these websites will have a quick guide for getting you started on installing it on your camera. But, for completeness sake, I will show you how to install my favorite custom firmware, Magic Lantern. The first step in installing Magic Lantern on your camera is by visiting the website. The website has a small introduction and shows off some features of Magic Lantern, but where you want to go to is the download page. From here, you'll want to go to the nightly builds page. My camera is the Canon EOS M. Once we have downloaded the right file, we follow along with the instructions on the website. The first step is to format the SD card in your digital camera. Make sure to back up any files or photographs you would like to keep. Now, we eject the SD card from our camera and plug it into the SD card reader of our computer or laptop. We simply drag the unzipped folder that we have downloaded from the website onto the SD card. We eject the SD card safely and insert it into the camera. Now, after booting the camera, we go to the settings menu and look for the firmware update function. Once we have run the firmware update procedure, we can now start the camera, and every time we do, Magic Lantern will boot up with it. Et voila! If you ever feel like uninstalling this custom firmware, simply follow the same procedure. Run the firmware update function once more, and the custom firmware is uninstalled. Happy photographing!